Before we begin our event, let's pause to reflect on the lands on which we reside. We come from many places and want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of the indigenous peoples. San Diego Mesa College is built on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Kumeyaay people. We acknowledge and honor their tremendous contributions to our region and thank them for their stewardship, past, present, and future. We also want to honor the legacy of the African diaspora, Black life, and the free enslaved labor upon which this country was built. We acknowledge, protect, and uplift the humanity of our Indigenous and Black sisters and brothers. With this acknowledgement, we want to give honor through our work and continue to stand up for racial and social justice. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Wendy Smith, and I am a facilitator for today's event, which is being recorded to share with those of us who cannot attend. Please fill out the survey. The link is in the chat. This helps us learn more about our audience and improve what we do. I teach English composition courses with the theme of ethnography and qualitative research. In other words, we study work by people who do research for a living. I want to point out that today is Monday, April 8th, 2024, the day of the eclipse, and I think very close to the apex of the eclipse where we're talking to Sandra Perez from. So I think it's a very auspicious time and place. We'll hear about her career journey, how she graduated from Mesa in 2019, transferred to UC Davis, and became a research analyst at the Education Trust in Washington, D.C. Shall we get started?
Let's do it. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy said. My name is Sandra Perez. I graduated in 2019 with an associate's in mathematics. Then I transferred to UC Davis, where I got my bachelor's in mathematical and scientific computation. I don't know what you would like me to start with, Wendy, if there's a certain
I'd like to hear a little about your time at Mesa and some of the things you did, things that went well, maybe stuff that didn't go well, because I know students are always curious about how people deal with obstacles, and maybe talk about, your time at UC Davis and the job you do now.
For sure. Okay. So I started at Mesa in 2014, right after I graduated high school. I knew I wanted to do math. I've always loved math. It was a very easy choice to choose my major. I just didn't know where I wanted to go or what exactly everything entailed. So I guess a little background before I got to Mesa. About a year and a half, I would say more like a year. I was kicked out of my home, so I was homeless. And I had to couch surf to try to, keep a roof over my head. And and so it was kind of like a decision of like, am I going to graduate high school? Am I not? What's going to happen? There were a lot of things up in the air. It was very scary. I didn't know what was going to happen, but thankfully, because of the community that I had, because of the families that were willing to take me in at different points in time, I was able to graduate. And then I was able to start my time at San Diego Mesa College. So first, began my courses at San Diego Mesa College. I didn't know what exactly I was going to do. I'd never been around people that had been to college before. So this was a totally brand new experience for me. And so first it was kind of trying to see where I fit in, right? Well, actually, even before that, it was trying to get a job, trying to make sure I find a way to make money. And one of the first things that I did was, go to financial aid and make sure I had work study. I wanted to work study. I wanted to stay on campus for as long as possible, just so that I was there, integrated into the community. So I was looking for jobs, and thankfully, Wendy had a position open to be an office assistant at the honors office. And I believe another one of my coworkers from that time is here with us today. So it was really fun. It was a lot to learn as an office assistant, learning about the honors office, learning about how the program worked. But working while also going to school was a new one for me. It was something different from high school, but it definitely gave me a sense of community. It definitely gave me a sense of, just a surrounding of people that I needed, because you can't do this journey alone. It's just really, really difficult to do alone. You need people who will help you, whether that's the professors, the staff, and or administrators, or even your peers. It's just really, really difficult to do this journey alone. Um, yeah, and so my journey for the first 2 years was really good, but it wasn't easy. There were definitely bumps in the road. I remember one course that I took, pre-calculus. I took it and I was so lost. I did not like it. I was like, what is going on? I don't get this. So I decided to withdraw from that course, and I felt really bummed. I didn't feel good about my decision to have to withdraw, but it was definitely the right one, because I came back, did the course again, and I passed with an A grade, so it was definitely the right one at that point in time. And as Wendy said, I graduated in 2019, so there's a few years in there. As to like what happened, why was I at community college for so long? But I wasn't there the whole time. I did take a year off, because some stuff happened in my personal life that, I hadn't really worked on my mental health. I hadn't really looked at what had happened, why I had become homeless, some things that have happened in my early life. I hadn't really taken time to deal with those things. So I decided to take a year off, reassess everything. And thankfully, because of people like Wendy, they're always like, it's always here. Community college is here. You can come back and you can finish. So I got a job, I worked on myself for a year, and I came back and I was able to, do my courses. I got a new job on campus, as an assistant for the Institutional Research Office, where I met amazing researchers. I had never been in an office with such, you know, passion for students, such intelligence. Just it was just so interesting to see how the staff cared so much for the students and for the well-being of the students. So it made me really passionate, like, I want to do research. I want to be a researcher. I want to be able to do this. So yeah, so after a while, I transferred to UC Davis. It was something else. UC Davis went really, really fast. The first quarter kicked my butt. It was really difficult because one, it went by so fast. Two, I'm doing these higher grade math courses that I've never thought of, these new concepts. It's not just, plug in some numbers and get a new number out, right? It's thinking about these different concepts and these theories. So it was something completely new. And I didn't have the same community as I did at Mesa, because at Mesa, I had the honors office, I had the honors club, I had, relationships with administrators and staff. And at UC Davis, it was sort of like time to start over, right? So it was a lot more difficult. And then in 2020, this little tiny thing happened where the pandemic stopped all in-person courses. And so I decided to take some time off again, because I did not like taking online courses with math. It was just not fun. But because of my earlier experience of taking time off and coming back, I knew that I could do it. I knew that, like, it's okay to take time off. I'll just get a job and go back, and I did, thankfully, I had the support of people like my roommates, shout out Margaret, she's here today. And yeah, I went back and I finished, and I got my degree. What was it? June 2021. um, or 2022, yeah. And so after that, it took about 6 months to find a job. It was really difficult. I was, trying to just putting my name out there, right? And getting a job as a researcher was my ultimate goal. But at that point in time, I was like, whatever I can get, I'll take. And I saw this job for a research analyst for Ed Trust or the Education Trust. And it was right up my alley. It was all about researching higher education, researching these universities. And I was so excited about it. So I applied to a position in Oakland. And there was also this little tiny button that said, oh, you can also apply for Washington, D.C. So I'm like, okay. So I applied, I did click apply, and all of a sudden, I get an interview for Washington, D.C. And yeah, a year and a half later, I'm here, and it's been great. So yeah, any questions from there?
I have a question. You look so happy, first of all, when you talk about getting that job, like your face really lights up. What were some of your feelings about moving across the country and working in this job where, you knew quite a bit about research, but not everything,
Yeah.
right?
So it was definitely intimidating. Um, Moving from California, the state that I've lived in my whole life, even just moving up to Davis was a lot. So moving across the country was very scary. It was a new journey, right? But because of everything that I've been through, because of the community that I had, I keep talking about community, but it's like, the lifeline that I have. Um, because of everything that I've been through, I think you start to embrace change in a way that you might have not been as it might have not been as easily attainable before, right? So because of everything, because I was so used to changes, I was like, this is a welcome change. I'm going to be doing something I love. I'm going to be using Excel all day, so I'm really excited. So yeah, it was an easy choice to say yes and move out here. Um, and learning about this new city where I've never been to was amazing. Meeting all these new people was so fun and interesting. Yeah, hi, Excel. It was so exciting to be here and, be in the nation's capital and, you know, learn about history, for free. There's so many free museums, the zoo's free. So it was totally different than I would have ever been to. But for the job itself, I was really, really intimidated because all of my coworkers had their masters, their doctorates. A lot of them went to these elite institutions, Harvard, Yale. I'd never met anybody that went to these institutions, so I was just like, oh, okay, so you're smart, smart. But but yeah, it was a lot to get used to. But now, I've gotten really used to my job and I feel a lot more um confident in my skills and what I can give to my position. And yeah, and Wendy, I get my own place all to myself, which is new because ever since I was, when I turned homeless, I didn't have anything, right? And then I was always sharing a room with somebody. At Davis, I, shared a room with two other people, and then I also had a living room with no door, no privacy. So now being here, I have my own apartment. I have, a new set of friends, new things that I could do every day. I could step out and just feel history and experience it all the time. So I'm very happy in the position that I'm in right now.
If no one else has a question, I haven't. Oh, hi. Oh, hi's clapping. I thought he had his hand up. So some of my students sent in questions, and someone was asking about walking us through the project that you just published. I'll put it in the chat again in case everyone's interested in reading it. How did that work? I mean, I know that Segregation Forever is a part of a larger project, but what what was the process of doing that?
Yeah, so in 2020, there was this report that one of our analysts produced called Segregation Forever, looking at the 101 most selective public institutions and how accessible they are to Black and Latino students. So it's basically grading these institutions based off how well they show or how well they mirror the state population on their campus. So for example, if a school is in California, how well does that population of students mirror the population in California? So that was the first start, right? And so this last year, we wanted to do the same thing again, but for private institutions, for institutions like Harvard, Yale, these really elite institutions. But we noticed that, hey, it might not be as fair to do the same calculation because they don't serve their states. They just kind of serve themselves. So their students come from everywhere. So what I did was come up with a calculation with the data that was available. We used this public database called iPads. And so from there, we downloaded all the institutions that we could, and we cut up and saw, what are the most selective institutions that are private, that are Title IV institutions, and how well do they do for Black and Latino students. So I did a lot of the math and the programming, and I had a coworker who did a lot of like the research, the literature, and then we came together and did two different reports. He led the Black report, and I led the Latino report. And yeah, and we found a lot of interesting data. Some not so surprising, and some a little more surprising. But yeah, and so from that actually came an even larger project where I actually redid the calculations for all universities in the US. So I will put a link in the chat with a Tableau dashboard. Um, oh, let me see. And then right here, you can actually look at different institutions, see how well institutions serve different communities. We have Native American, Alaska Native, Pacific Islander, Asian, White, Black, Latino. So we're limited as to the amount of ethnic and racial groups, but with the data that we had to try to see like what can we do with it, and so this is what we got.
Thank you for that. I love dashboards. Plus, I can do a lot of snooping.
Yeah, and San Diego Mesa College is on there too. If you want, I could do a quick little demo.
Okay, do a demo for us. That's pretty cool. Okay.
Yeah, let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so this is like one of the first dashboards. Right here we have public sector where race and ethnicity is Native American and Alaska Native. And so we see that since 2000, it's actually gone down. So access for Native American students has gone down over the years with all the institutions in the US, with 56% of them scoring F grades in 2020. So that's pretty shocking. And this is actually the only race or ethnic group that actually goes down in A's and up in F's. So it's pretty interesting. But one thing that you can do here is actually go to the ranking institutions by accessibility. And right here, this is predominantly bachelor's degrees. So if we look at associate degrees, we can actually scroll down and find Mesa at 23 in the whole US. So that's quite interesting. If you hover, you can see that they score an 85 for accessibility in total. And you can see for Asian or Pacific Islander, Black, Native American, or actually Pacific Islander or white, they score A's. For Latinos, they score B. And fortunately, they score an F for Native American and Alaska Native. But overall, it is one of the highest scoring in California, if I'm not wrong. We can look here and go up to California. And then, yeah, San Diego Mesa is number one in California for accessibility. So it's pretty cool. And if you want to look at even deeper, you can do it by institution. So you can actually look up San Diego Mesa. Diego. And then you can see how it's changed over the years. So since it is a public institution, you're going to focus on the state representation. So you can see that it's gone a little up and down over the years, but not by much. It stayed pretty much relatively the same. So there has been a difference in Native American Alaska Native, so it's gone down over the years, all the way down to an F. But most of the scores in 2020 were A's. So now after we have the data, after we've analyzed the data, now we think, what is the reason for this, right? With this big of a scale of a study, we can't unfortunately do that as easily because you'd have to look at every single institution and what they're doing and what affects each institution and their scores. But we can make recommendations, and that's also something that we have at the very end of the report. So we talk about, better guidance counselors. We talk about accountability from people who give these institutions money. We talk about, campus racial climates and improving them. For the Latino report, I talk about improvements to P12 English learners programs. I myself was an English learner, and I was in it until about fourth grade. But I had learned English pretty well after the first grade. It wasn't something that I struggled with. I did pretty well. And up until fourth grade, I was getting taken out of my classes, getting, tested on my English when I was getting proficient and advanced in the state testing. So it was something that needs reform, that we need to talk about. But I also touch on it in the report as well. Yeah.
Are you saying that you were in bilingual classes until fourth grade?
Yeah, so I was in a bilingual course in kindergarten and first grade. And then after that, I was just in, the mainstream courses.
But you were
But
still identified and tested as a language learner.
exactly,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't until I moved actually from San Diego to El Cajon that they stopped testing me. But even then, when I moved to El Cajon, I had to like read all these like basic first grade, you know, books so that they could test my literacy, which
Wow.
was a waste of time.
Uh,
It was so frustrating. Especially when I'm like in math class, my favorite subject, I'm doing math, and they tell me, okay, you have to go with this person, and then they point out a book and they point at one word at a time, make sure that I'm saying it correctly, make sure that I'm doing it. I'm just like, look at my California exams. I got advanced in English this year. I got a proficient this year. Like, yeah.
were they
So
going by records from the previous school or were they making assumptions?
they just made assumptions. It wasn't anything like, oh, let's test you and see how well you're doing. It was just, let's start
Right.
you off with this book. You have to finish these many books before you go on to the fourth grade level. So it was a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's not good.
yeah. So lots of improvements to be done with P12, but my focus is in higher ed. However, we try to make that connection with P12 as much as possible because there is no higher ed without P12, right? It's really important that we always, look at where students are coming from and how that journey affects them in higher ed.
Looks like we have a question in the chat. Can you see the chat, Sandra?
No.
Oh, and okay, so Lance Parker asks, well, first he says, very impressed by your story. And what is the MR access score?
Yeah, the MR access score is what we use mostly for private institutions, but it's basically the migration representation score. So let's say a school gets 5 freshmen, right? Um, 3 of them came from California, one of them came from Ohio, and another came from Florida, right? So let's say, for example, Latino, the Latino score is going to be much higher in California than, let's say, Ohio, right? So we don't want to score them equally and say, okay, since it's 3 schools, it's going to be a third. So you get a third, you get a third, and you get a third. No, that doesn't really make sense. So what we do instead is get the population from California, and then we get the population from Ohio, and then we get the population from Florida, and then from there, we create a benchmark based off of how many students come from each state to that institution. So it's based off migrations of the students and where their home states are.
Thank you. That was very clear. I see that Daisy has a hand up. Daisy, what is your question?
Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I can actually resonate with you. It sounds so crazy, but as of right now, I learned from you that that's what they were doing to me too. I'm like, oh my God, I was getting pulled out of classes too, right? And English was my first language, but at home I was speaking Spanish, but I was always getting pulled out of class. And I felt like an outsider, like, why me, right?
Yeah.
I recently just got my master's in counseling, so I'm now an adjunct counselor career here at Miramar. And I never thought I was gonna make it so far because it was all these challenges that I went through school that, I always felt like I was the only one, and getting told that you may not make it that far because you need these supports. It was kind of like upsetting. It wasn't until I was at Mesa that I became part of the DSPS program. That's where I felt so supported, and I thought, I'm gonna make it far. I am. But I did have a question for you. And I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but are you planning to look into earning a master's program?
Mhm. Yeah, so I definitely want to do my master's. I don't know exactly in what, and I'm still trying to figure out what exactly I want to do it or when exactly I want to do it. You know, I'm 28 now. I've gone to school my whole life. Um, so I think I'm taking a break right now to really figure out like what my professional skills are, what I can do in this space first, and then see if I can make relationships with professors and talk to them and see how I can add to their work, right? Because finding your master's and your even your PhD is kind of more of a job search, you know, because you're trying to do research and you're trying to help these professors with their doctorates, like, oh, with their research. So for now, I'm just taking some time off doing this. Hopefully I get to, you know, do data for a very, very long time. That's definitely never going to change. But yeah, master's definitely in the future. I will say that, like, you know, even getting my bachelor's was something that I never thought I would get. It was just like, it's just kind of a far off dream, you know? And my friends have a video of it, but when I finally got my bachelor's degree like in my hands, even walking across the stage was still strange, but having the bachelor's degree in my hands with my name printed on it, with my major, I was just like, I cried. I was just like, I never thought this would happen for me, you know, being homeless, being an orphan, being like, you know, all of these different things that I've been called, right? Even as a child, being called lazy, being called all of these things, like having all of those labels felt like a huge weight all the way through. And then when I got my bachelor's degree, it was sort of like a weight lifted and being like, no, this is me. I know I'm smart. I know I'm capable. I know I can do this. And yeah, and that's kind of the spirit that I've thankfully lived on with, even with all my past challenges.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
That was really beautifully put. Are there other questions from the audience? Oh, it looks like a Shante Hands has entered the room. I do have a question for you, Sandra, and that is, what about, this is an English teacher question, right? What about the writing? It looks like you and his name,
Gabriel.
thank you, Gabriel, um, did certain parts of the research separately, and it probably involved some collaboration, but what about
Yeah.
the writing of the report? What was the process for that?
So it was a lot different than I've ever done, right? They tell us that academic writing is different than what we write. Our blogs, our reports, they're different. So it was a lot of finding the sources, um, trying to figure out like what are we trying to say, right? So for him, it was a lot easier to dive into the literature immediately and look up different things. But for me, especially since I was so new to the space, I was like, I need to look at the numbers first. What are the numbers telling me? What are they? What's the message that I'm going to get from the numbers so that I can write about it, right? So I focused a lot on the data, on the numbers, the calculations. And once I had those analyses done, then I had a better picture of what my message was going to be. And thankfully, we already had Dr. Andrew Nichols' last report, so we already knew the sort of structure that we were going to go through. But yeah, so I did the data, figured out what my message was going to be, and then from there, it was separating it into sections, right? So this section is going to be all about the data, all about the analysis, but this section is going to be the introduction to this study. This section is going to be why this study is important. This section is going to be what we want people to gain from this study, what we want people to do with this study, right? So it was a lot of back and forth, especially since me and Gabriel worked in two different ways. It was a lot of like, where do we align, right? So I helped him a lot with the numbers, with the analysis, and he helped me a lot with the literature. And we were basically on teams all the time, like, hey, I have this idea for this portion. What do you think can support this? What source do you think can support this idea the most? And then he would search some stuff, he would give it to me, and then he would ask me questions like, hey, these numbers are doing this, what sources can do that, right? So it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of making sure our outline was exactly the same for both of us, and that we were both on the same page with how we find our sources and how we interpret the sources. So there were some times where we just sat down with different reports and be like, are we thinking the same thing when we read this? Are our readers going to feel like these are two different ideas? How can we make sure that our interpretation is the same as the reader's interpretation? So yeah, it was that, and definitely a lot of reading from outside sources. We had a lot of people reread our reports over and over and over to make sure that the ideas that we were saying were easy to understand for anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, accessibility is really important, I think.
Yeah.
Since Mesa College's president, Dr. Ashante Hands, has entered the room, can you talk a little bit again about Mesa's score? I think she'd like to hear about that.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, I could go. Are you still seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I can do the ranking institutions by accessibility. Um, so if we look at only associate's degree granting institutions, so that's the predominant degree, we can see a ranking of community colleges and how accessible each institution is for each race and ethnicity. And as we scroll down, San Diego Mesa College is actually number 23 in the whole nation. So if we scroll all the way down, that's out of 122 colleges in the study. So being number 23 is pretty amazing. And the only group that is unfortunately not being as I guess there's not as much accessibility for them is for the Native American Alaska Native group, which San Diego Mesa has scored a 30 in. But for the rest of the racial and ethnic groups, they got A's, except for Latino, they got a low B. So I think that might be something to look at. And in total, they got an 85. So again, if we look at the state, for example, in all of the state of California, San Diego Mesa College scored #1 as the most accessible community college in California. So yeah, I'm really proud to be an alumnus from San Diego Mesa College. I always talk about San Diego Mesa College. You know, it's my favorite thing to talk about, especially for people who still need to decide on either going to a 4-year or a community college. Like I tell them, don't discount community college. Community college is amazing and it's my favorite. I met so many people from there, and people are successful. Like I know one veteran who went to Stanford University, and then he's now working for NASA's labs. And then I know another one of our students went to Berkeley, got a double bachelor's, and then went to be a senior at Amazon. You know, so people change their lives at Mesa. And at community college, it's a place where you build your community, right? So yeah, I miss it and I love it and I love talking about it.
We miss you too. Who else has questions for Sandra? Oh, we have something in the chat. Okay, this is from Lance Parker. When I look at this dashboard, I feel confused because I don't understand accessibility or the A through F system. If 50% of the California population identifies as Hispanic and 50% of our students are Hispanic, is that an A for that demographic? If so, then it can be a zero-sum game, which is odd. Is it based on enrollment or completion or something else? Sorry, I'm not an education researcher.
No, that's totally fine. So we do have limitations of this study. First of all, I will say, we are limited into the type of data that we have. And so we have to use the census data and IPEDS data. So every year, every institution needs to do a survey basically of that's given to NCES. And so from there, we get our information and it's a publicly available data system. So it's a little difficult to figure out how we do this. And so what we are doing is you get a 100 if you are exactly like your state, right? If 50% of the students on campus and 50% of California residents ages 18 to 24 are Latino, then you hit 100. However, we do the grading system from 90. So if you hit 90, you get an A. If so anything above 90, you've scored an A. We say we would love to have all races or ethnicities around 100. We're not really particular about who's A, B's, you know, it's just more of something that institutions should look at and just be like, hey, why is this score lower than the others? Is there something that we're doing wrong? What can we do with that? And definitely with the study, we really want institutions to take their own data and use it to calculate these numbers in more accurately, because we're limited to the amount of data we have. We don't see everything that San Diego Mesa College has, for example. So looking at their data and comparing it to the state, I think is really important to see how we're doing, you know, especially with affirmative action being, you know, being limited in pretty much every in the whole country. I think it's definitely something important that we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially because in the 90s, when affirmative action was banned in California, we saw a huge dip in enrollment for very important, you know, for minorities and groups of of people that need help in accessing these institutions. So yeah.
Thank you. Are there some other questions for Sandra? Okay, I'm going to go back to some of the questions from students. Sometimes they're a little shy about asking them in person, so we'll see if we can answer a couple here. Okay, here's one. I am wondering what it was like for you to transfer. How was attending and studying at Mesa College different to UC Davis for you? Do you think the way students were treated was different too?
Yeah, oh, definitely. So at Mesa, it was sort of like go in, you can stay on campus, and I was able to, talk to administrators, talk to my professor. It was really, really easy to create that like relationship with my peers, with my professors, with the administrators. It was just, I don't know, simple. It didn't feel so hard. But when I got to UC Davis, it felt a lot more difficult. It's probably a combination of like, the amount of work that the professors have to do because they're not only just professors, they're researchers too. So they have all of this stuff that they're focusing on. So it's kind of difficult to just be a professor and just teach, right? So it was a lot more difficult to talk to my professors sort of one-on-one. It was more difficult to talk to administrators because they're working with like so many more students. It's a huge campus. Um, so I think, that was probably like one of the most difficult things. Also, when you go from San Diego Mesa to most UCs, you go from a semester system to a quarter system. So it's a lot faster, 10 weeks. You miss a day, it's like you've missed like a week in the semester system because it's just they cover so much so fast. And you really, really have to catch up whenever you miss a lesson. It's really strange, but I feel like you get used to it. I don't know. I ended up enjoying it after the first quarter or two. It was like, okay, even though I don't like this class or I don't like how this professor teaches, I just have to go through 10 weeks and then I'm done. So, yeah.
I think students are anxious sometimes about transferring. And I think it was you. I think it was you and Margaret and a couple of other Mesa students went on a road trip to investigate colleges so that you could see what it felt like to be on those campuses.
No, it was Margaret and I believe two other honor students. But yeah, they went on a road trip. I don't know how far up in California they went. But yeah, they went pretty far and they just went and looked at what it's like, what clubs. I don't remember exactly what they found, but yeah. I mean, you find your community, right? And you find the other students that are trying to transfer, you talk to each other, you try to like give each other advice, and eventually you get enough support where you feel like, okay, transferring is doable. Oh, there you go. I think Margaret's in the chat, right?
Yeah. We went up to Davis as our farthest, but it was just UC's. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, it's pretty far north, I think.
Yeah.
And we have a question in the chat. I'm seeing many students take 4 years to get to the transfer stage. Is that a problem? And if so, how can it be shortened?
Oh man, I took 4 years. Uh, I think it's I think there's this conversation that we're all having about, why are students taking so long? Talking about pathways, right? Are we, as soon as students come in, do they know the pathway that they're going for, right? It's kind of difficult, and students change their majors all the time. Like it's kind of like something that you change a lot, especially in the beginning. Because sometimes you might take a course and realize, oh, this is what I want to do, right? So I think it's difficult to say, but I think having some sort of initial like exploratory course where you can see like what types of jobs you can get into, what types of things you can study, would be super helpful in the beginning. Also, I think it would be really helpful if you can have more of a connection with the financial aid office, with the student admissions, just like being able to have them talk to you more personally, like more one-on-one. I think it helps really like answer any questions that you can have. Right. I remember going to the financial aid office multiple times, asking so many questions because I was on my own and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So um there's so many different factors, right? And then community college also, students are parents, students are veterans, they're first time students, they are working. Like me, they were homeless, there's so many different types of students. So at the community college, I don't think it's so much of a pressure to get through so fast. At least students don't feel as pressured. But I think making sure that students have a goal, and students know how to reach that goal, I think it's going to be extremely helpful, especially after like the first semester.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Any hands up I'm not seeing? All right, well, oh, Alex, thank you.
Hi. Wait, can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to go back to Sandra's story, um, and just how she got to her research analyst. Do you think joining like these clubs and like events really helped you choose what you wanted to be? And in the beginning, was there a light where you're like, oh, like this is really what I wanted to do? And just like for me, I am a fully online student at Mesa College. I take classes at Mesa, Miramar City, and I feel like I'm not as um, involved in those schools, and I just don't really know where to go because right now I'm a business major, and I just don't really know where to go for any of these events or really if I'm actually involved in this business environment. So my question is like, do you have any suggestions to really get involved in your major or um, yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, so I think for me, working on campus was really like my biggest, help. Because, being an assistant in the research office gave me the biggest, eye-opening, like, "Oh, wow, this is what I wanna do. I wanna be a researcher." Right? So, seeing what people can do with the skills that they learn, I think is something that helped me a lot. But even if you can't work on campus, getting to clubs, trying to stay on campus. I know you said you're online, but if you can go to even like the school library, right? Hang out with other students, try to research maybe any business clubs that might be available. I'm sure that there's many of those in all three on all three campuses. Um, I think, try to be on campus. I think something that I wish I would have done a lot more at UC Davis was stay on campus for longer. I know at San Diego Mesa College, I was like always there. I spent most of my day there. I would go in early in the day and then leave late. So being on campus helps. Looking for any clubs and talking to people. You need to talk to people. You need to see what their interests are, see if they align with yours, and see what you can do with that. Um, yeah, yeah, I think that would be some of my biggest ones.
thank you.
That was an amazing question because I felt kind of, even though there were no online courses when I went to college, I was a commuter student. I didn't go away, and I never quite developed a community, and I didn't try super hard to. Even when I got an on-campus job, it was like driving distance away from the main campus. Um, So that was tough. And when I think back, I think that I should have been a little more of a joiner and a little more active and stayed on campus more instead of just going there and driving home. That's a really good
Yeah.
point.
Don't be scared to join clubs. I think everybody's like on the same level. Everybody's scared of like what other people are gonna think, you know. But once you get over that fear, it's so much easier to make friends, so much easier to talk to people and make those connections.
Thank you. We have time for one more comment or question if anyone would like to ask. I'm looking at the student questions, just seeing if there's something that we can cover. It looks like we've covered a lot of them just in discussion. But okay, we're jumping around a little. We've gone like from the personal. Oh, we've got something in the chat. If we want to further connect with you, Sandra, is there an email that we can access?
Yeah.
Maybe you
So
can
it's
put
gonna
that in the
be,
chat.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. Do the chat. Ah, there we go.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate it. And if you want, you could just share it privately with Daisy, but I'm sure
I
people
don't
would
mind.
like to know more about your story.
Yeah, no, please, like anybody can contact me at any time. I don't mind. Um, I have Wendy and I were talking about I have interns now, and they ask me questions all the time. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, please ask me questions anytime. I am here for any questions, any comments, anything that you need help with, any support. You know, it's really important to make these connections and network. You know, you never know what person's going to help change your life. Like Wendy was mine. Wendy, Margaret, you know, they helped me get through community college, and you know, I'm here now, so I could not have done it without them.
Ooh, looks like you have a couple of questions now. A couple of emboldened people. Hi asks, from Mesa to Sacramento to DC, from a student to system change agent, where do you see yourself in 5 years professionally?
Yeah, 5 years, wow. So one of my biggest passions right now in this space is not only accessibility, but pathways. I think right now I'm doing a study on the cost of attendance for credentials, which are less than 2 years, right? So I'm trying to see how that is for students. But one thing I'm really passionate about is making sure that people who maybe don't immediately want to go to college, people who want to go into work, that they can get credit for the work that they've done. You know, if you work in construction for I don't know how many years, and then you go to college to get your degree in construction management, you already have so much experience. You shouldn't have to take all of these courses, right? So I'm really passionate about making sure people get the credit that they deserve, whether it's, you know, whether it's from work experience or whether it's from study experience. Like, people learn these skills and they should get credit for them. So I'm hoping that I do more pathways work, hopefully in, you know, doing some state longitudinal data systems work. I've been talking to a lot of people from like Kentucky, Minnesota, Tennessee, seeing how their data systems work, and seeing how there can be a more formal way of reproducing that in every state in the US. So yeah, I'll still be in the data space. I hope to still be in the higher education space, but definitely making some changes to policy where students can go through the system a lot easier and with less pressure. Yeah.
Wonderful. We have one more question that we can end on. If you can just speak briefly about the kind of community you found at UC Davis.
Oh.
I
So
remember talking to you about a math group toward the end, and I
yeah.
forgot what it was called, and I had to laugh because it sounded so specific and nerdy, and I loved it.
Um, I don't Okay, so I have a few math groups. I don't know which one. But I was in math club for a while. And that was, it was interesting. Um, it was a little strange because a lot of the students there were not transfer students. They were students that had already been there for I don't know how long. And so they're already used to all this theoretical language of math, and I'm just like, I've never been exposed to it. This is new to me. So learning that was something new. But yeah, so other than that, I also had the community of my roommates. Thankfully, Margaret, who was at community college with me, I followed her up to UC Davis, and so I was able to live with her for the first year of my undergraduate life, and it was really fun. She helped me really look for all my opportunities. I was able to connect with other students that were also transfers that were in my math classes, so that was really, really important too. Um, yeah, and then I had another roommate. She's not on this call, but Miriam, and she also helped introduce me to a lot of other students too that weren't in math, but they were actually in like political science and policy. So it was really fun. So yeah, it's just, finding what you love, and hopefully you find other people that are also passionate about the same thing, and then connecting with them.
I think we should end on that. I mean, I think that's everybody's life goal, and we should be thinking about that every day. I want to thank you for coming. This was just so exciting and wonderful for me. I could cry. So everyone, thank you for attending. Please remember to fill out the survey for this. It really helps us with our data. Today was our last speaker for the spring ethnographer extravaganza, and we hope everyone enjoyed our series. Enjoy this important and magical day.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.